Jeffy. We want the house to look nice, don't we?
We've helped almost 1 million people buy and sell homes. We're Realty World, the results people.
I'm glad we sold it fast. Dad can only take so much pressure.
For fast action, call the results people at the Realty World office nearest you.
BCTV, we're giving it all we got.
Good morning. I only have one prediction to make this morning. There will not be a general strike on Christmas Day or Boxing Day in British Columbia. But I would draw attention to the fact that Dr. Norman Spector has returned refreshed from a holiday in Palm Springs to the right elbow of Premier Bennett. And as far as the latest somewhat hysterical threats from the BC Fed and Operation Solidarity are concerned, I plan to let them, thank God say you, simmer on the back burner until somebody visits somebody else at their home somewhere and comes up with another understanding, a restatement, or partial compromise, or a little bit of a back down somewhere to try and event this next second attempt to bring the province of British Columbia out for, of all people, the teachers. Purely beside the point. No opinion expressed in that whatsoever. So this morning, instead, I'm going to bore you to death.
Thanks, folks.
No offense to my guest, who is the distinguished Attorney General of the province of Manitoba by the name of Roland Penner. But it would seem that Manitoba has recently left the 1890s and that the NDP government is going to push ahead, would you believe it, with its plan to entrench French language rights in Manitoba, and we'll find, I suspect, that there is a vast morass of misunderstanding in Manitoba, where recently a plebiscite destroyed public backing for the entrenching of French language rights as such. But Roland Penner will spell it out to us very simply and cogently. My next guest is annoyed by the way I describe her in a line you will see later on. I call her Klondike Bee. I apologize to Klondike Bee. She is Bea Firth. She is a hunter. She shoots wild animals. She is from the Yukon, and she is the Minister, among other things, of Education and Tourism. And then to salve my conscience this morning, and some days it needs salving, you're going to meet a fellow called Bill Russell, the Reverend Bill Russell, who is General Secretary of the Canadian Bible Society, recently back from the other side of the Iron Curtain. But first, let's struggle with the Manitoba language question, which has been on since 1870, with Roland Penner after the break. Many people in the West were, I think, kind of surprised when a massive plebiscite was held in the city of Winnipeg and some surrounding municipalities, and the people voted totally and absolutely, 76 to 80%, against any bilingualism in Manitoba. Is that not correct?
Yeah, they voted against what they thought was being proposed by the government, namely a forced requirement on them to speak French. That was one of the gut issues to which they reacted, but essentially, of course, was not our program.
What is happening in Manitoba? Why is Polly going ahead? I see that Sterling Lyon wants an election at once on the question of this entrenchment of the French language. And if there were an election today, there's not much doubt that your NDP government would be defeated.
Possibly.
Possibly.
Sterling Lyon has wanted an election from the day after he was defeated, but that's another issue.
Yeah, I know, but the fact remains is there's great public resentment about what your Premier Howard Polly is trying to do. Can you please tell me what he's trying to do?
okay, we're trying to live up to our constitutional obligations, because when we entered Confederation in 1870, the Manitoba Act, which is our provincial constitution, in fact, already entrenched basic French language rights in the courts, in the legislature, in the laws. The legislature of Manitoba in 1890, which by then had become predominantly English, started out on a 50-50 basis, tore up this social contract, this agreement, this constitutional guarantee. And the issue then is respect for the Constitution, because in 1979, the Supreme Court, Jack, said that that 1890 law was invalid. And that's what tore it, because subsequently a case came before, and it still is before the Supreme Court, which in effect says, if the Supreme Court finds that way, that all our laws passed in one language only, when the Constitution says two languages, are invalid.
Stop there.
Okay.
In 1870, when Manitoba became a province, 50-50 French and English.
About 52-48 French-English.
Right. In 1890, the English were predominant.
70-30.
And you had a bilingual act in 1890, and the legislature then tore it up.
Unlawfully, because it was a constitution, and the legislature can't tear up a constitution.
Recently, a man got a parking ticket.
Started with a traffic ticket.
Bilodeau.
Right.
A traffic ticket.
Yeah.
He took that to court, and the Supreme Court said it should have been in French.
Well, he took that on the basis, finally, as the issue is before the Supreme Court, that the laws upon which that ticket was based, passed in one language only, were invalid.
So that you were reversed right away to a bilingual province like the Lumpet by the effect of that court decision.
Well, in fact, if the Supreme Court found for Bilodeau, we would be a province without laws. We would be a province without a legal infrastructure. We would be in legal chaos. That was the issue which I, as Attorney General, so-called Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the Crown, had to face and deal with. Either you take the gamble and go to the Supreme Court and said, well, find that if you must, or you try to work out a sensible deal.
So you tried to work out a sensible deal?
I tried it.
And what was that sensible deal?
Well, it was this, that in exchange for validating our laws and putting upon us an obligation to translate not 4,500 laws, but only 400, a saving of millions to the province, we would entrench, add to the rights already there, some limited French language services and give them a constitutional guarantee. It was a simple, it was a sensible, it was an honorable deal, but misunderstood, and that's where politicians sometimes fall down.
And that was why the plebiscite was taken?
Yes.
Because your deal was misunderstood?
It certainly was.
And when the plebiscite was taken in Greater Winnipeg, etc., it went down the tube 80% against it.
Yep.
But your government's position today is what?
Our government's position is this, that minority rights, whether they're language rights or educational rights, ought not to be and cannot in all principle be the subject of referenda. I mean, that way lies dictatorship, basically.
Oh, disaster.
Yeah, that way lies the tyranny of the majority, and that's not what democracy is about.
Correct. So now you are going ahead, your government intends to push ahead with its plan to entrench French language rights in Manitoba on a modified basis.
Right. And when you say push ahead, I'd like to make this clear. We held public hearings. There were 300, 400 submissions. It was magnificent in a way, because there you really had a sensible dialogue and debate. And we're paying attention to that, and what we're trying to do now is to bring back to the legislature in a week or two a somewhat modified proposal that will take into account some of the worst fears and concerns expressed in those hearings.
Now, what will the effect of your new legislation be? This has nothing to do with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
No, it's similar to, because those kind of guarantees for French language services Canada-wide are in the Charter already. But this applies them to the province of Manitoba.
And now how many of them will apply? Will this mean that automatically, where numbers don't even warrant, that tuition in the schools will be in French or English?
No. First of all, the French language educational rights are in the Charter and were not part of our package, and they are based on a numbers
where numbers warrant.
And our services package, which was to be added, are based on a where numbers warrant principle. And above all, what our proposal does not do, and this is where it was really misunderstood, it doesn't require anyone who doesn't want to speak any other language but the language of their choice.
Well, now, those people who passed these extraordinary plebiscites in these 16 or so municipalities, were they misguiding the public? Were they not telling the truth to get this vote? You tell me there's no requirement for anyone to speak French, other than, broadly speaking, as in the Official Languages Act.
Well, I don't like to pass judgment on anyone and say that they're misguiding deliberately, but I think effectively they were misguiding by their own misunderstanding of the issue.
So what you will have now, apart from the Charter, if this legislation passes, and it will.
Yes, it will. We're determined.
Do you have solidity in your own cabinet, in your own party?
Yes, we do.
Do you have a clear majority?
Oh, yes.
How many seats?
We have 34, well, less the Speaker and less one dissident. We have 32 opposed to 23.
But so you can pass whatever you so wish.
Yes, you can, although when you come to a constitutional provision or amendment, one hesitates to go to the length of using closure, which you might have to do. So in effect, the ball is as much in the opposition's court as it is in ours, because it's the opposition which has pounced upon this issue like a tiger sensing game, and have torn the pieces and thrown them to in the public arena in an unconscionable way. So we hope that they come around after they're electing a new leader at the end of this week.
Who is?
The Manitoba Tories.
What do you mean, this Lion finished?
Yeah, out, finished.
Gone?
Yeah.
Thrown out or quit?
Gone but not forgotten. No, he quit.
He quit,
He
did
quit,
he?
yeah.
A little more, and any questions from Manitobans on this, by the way? I'm not sure I've got it clear yet. From Roland Penner, the Attorney General, after the break.
On the Canadian government.
You see, under the present Official Languages Act, which was one of the bills mishandled by the Trudeau government over the years because they spent the money in the wrong places in a large extent, we now have, as a nation, the obligation whereby any citizen can communicate with his federal government in the language, French or English, of his choice. Is that correct?
Well, that's right. It's been a statutory obligation since 1969, but it's now part of the Constitution.
And it is now in the Charter.
Right.
So therefore, your amendment to your own law, forget the details, so your new law will be to give Manitobans the same rights with the Manitoba government as they have in the Charter.
That's right.
In other words, if I'm a Franco-Manitoban, I can deal with the government in my language, and I can testify in my language in court.
Right.
And my laws will in the main be written in both English and my language.
The most important public laws will be in both languages.
So that's courts, laws, legislature.
And services.
And services, like social welfare.
Right. If I want to go to a social welfare office where numbers warrant, in an area where there's a significant Francophone population, you can go in there and there'll be somebody who can talk to that person.
And this is what all this fuss is about.
That's right. Can you believe?
No, I can't believe it.
Well, that shows you what...
Mind you, we do not have that in British Columbia at the moment. You're not entitled to service in the French language in provincial institutions here. You want to have a larger...
Well, BC didn't enter Confederation on the same terms as Manitoba did.
Yeah, when you entered, you had this particular law making you bilingual, and that law was illegally wiped out by this House.
Exactly.
So you're bringing in an act to replace it on a modified basis.
Exactly.
What's all the fuss about?
The fuss is about people who lost an election and would like to win it back on any basis, in my view.
But there's also another fuss about the lack of understanding by Manitobans as well as by Canadians all across the country.
There's a frightening aspect to
What's
it,
the
and
frightening aspect?
The ease with which people's gut feelings about minority rights or language rights can
about
be manipulated.
French Canadians.
Yeah.
To be quite blunt.
To be quite blunt, in this instance, about French Canadians, right?
Now, I was reading in preparation for this something which seems to be totally unnecessary. The Manitoba School Act. Is this in any way involved in the old Catholic, non-Catholic fight in the schools?
No, it's not an issue at all.
No way, shape, or form.
The issue of French language instruction in our schools was resolved through the 60s and 70s. We have provisions. We have what we call French language immersion classes. We have second language instruction, and it's working very, very well without any furor, without any pain, without any suffering.
And you're covered like the rest of us by the Charter, which says that where numbers warrant, French language instruction may be provided.
Precisely.
Subject to the reasonable limitation section of the Charter in any case.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
So all this breeding fuss in Manitoba and all this hysteria has been about the fact that you are bringing back a little bit of official language approach to the government by citizens who speak French. How much will it cost you?
Well, it'll cost us a lot less than not doing. It'll cost us approximately, in terms of translating the statutes and carrying on the services, about $750,000 to $850,000 a year.
That's all?
It's peanuts.
Even for Manitoba, it's peanuts. Isn't it?
That's right. And we're a poor province, I would like to plead
We
at
got
this
calls
time.
going on this? I'd like to take a call on this.
Sure.
I could ask you how things are going in Manitoba. What's your unemployment rate?
It's the second lowest in the country.
How much?
It's about a little below 9.
That's because of your weather. People don't want to stay there.
That's because we're managing the economy so well, Jack. You know that.
No, but seriously.
No, in fact, no. We've had a net gain in population year over year of a very significant amount. In fact, the largest net gain in population in 20 years.
What do you...
The people who left at the time when Alberta and BC looked like oldest land and the Golden Shore rolled in together have come back from the land of turmoil and strife and unemployment.
You can still buy a house in Winnipeg for what, $60,000?
You can buy a house in Winnipeg for $38,500 and change.
And you don't have any, well, you've got a major unemployment program with, say, 9% or less, you say.
Where the major unemployment problem is, and that's another issue entirely, is with the native population and with youth. In some of the native communities, it's 80–90%.
Yeah. That's a real disaster.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I've got a question. Why would you want to give the French minority in Manitoba extended language rights, while in Quebec the French are suppressing any rights from the English-speaking minority there? I mean, you can also ask for an amendment on the Entry Act of Manitoba instead of going the other way around and making Manitoba bilingual. And if I see the way the French behave in Quebec, I can understand that the English-speaking people in Manitoba are sort of scared.
Okay, hold on.
All right?
With respect to Quebec, they have the same constitutional guarantee, they being the Anglophone minority, as the Francophone minority has in Manitoba. And Peter Blakey, former national president of the Conservative Party, took sections of Bill 101 up to the Supreme Court, and they found in his favor, because of that constitutional guarantee, they struck out some of the worst offending sections of Bill 101. In terms of services to the Anglophone minority, and I've talked to leaders of the English minority groups in Quebec, their services are far more available. They have their own school boards, English language school boards, and hospitals and social agencies, far more extensively than is the case in Manitoba. What Bill 101 does, which is offensive, and is now being changed in part, it has some imposition on business with respect to
Signs.
store signs and things
Store
of that
signs.
kind.
Right.
Yeah, but you are not making Manitoba bilingual by this act.
No, we're not.
That's surely the point that was misunderstood in your plebiscite.
Well, what was really misunderstood was the notion that people thought that they would have to speak French. About 60% thought they would, and that signs and so on all over the place would be in 2 languages and be confusing. But on some very respectable polls, not conducted by us, Jack, but by pollsters for some radio and TV stations, 61% were actually in favor of limited French language services. And had they known that that's what they were voting on, the referenda results might have been quite different.
Funny. Thank you very much, sir. Go ahead, please.
Hi,
Hello.
Jack. How are you?
Fine.
Mr. Pinner,
Yeah.
you are being blackmailed.
I've never been blackmailed in my life, sir, and I don't think I am now at all. You can't be blackmailed when somebody is taking your own constitution to court and the Supreme Court tells you that you must obey the law. We live in a society which prides itself on the rule of law, not the rule of persons. And if I follow the rule of law, how am I being blackmailed?
Well, you're not following it. 'Cause every law that you have passed in Manitoba since 1890 is illegal, right?
Right.
You're trying to avoid it, right? Because you're kittling down the Francophone society and the federal government. Let's take the goddamn thing to the Supreme Court and throw out the goddamn thing.
Well, that's easy enough to say, but if you were in my position, sir, you wouldn't take that attitude. I don't think you can. You know, what happens the day after the Supreme Court says that all your laws are invalid? How do you enforce the criminal code? How do you take criminals to court? How do you take the drunken drivers to court? Your courts are invalid. Your laws are invalid. Would you take that risk? I wouldn't.
Didn't realize that.
Sure.
If you lose which case?
The Bilodeau case.
You lose the Bilodeau case, you've got no laws.
Precisely because...
Every law invalid.
That's right. And even if the chance is only 5%, let's suppose it's only 5%, because the Supreme Court would try to work out some compromise, would you take that gamble? Would you gamble with the whole kit and caboodle? Or would you try and work out a way of saving the day?
More calls to Roland Penner, Attorney General of Manitoba, after the break. So the Attorney General of Manitoba tells me that if you lost the current case in the Supreme Court of Canada, which ruled that all your laws not passed bilingually would be illegal.
That's right, and that's virtually all of the laws passed since 1890.
And to reach that to its, extrapolate it to its nonsensical conclusion, you wouldn't be Attorney General anymore.
Well, no, because the government of Manitoba
would not exist.
The legislature is elected pursuant to the Legislative Assembly Act passed in one language only.
Under the Bilingualism case.
Mind you, it would be the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, but I don't know if...
I often say that a little bit of anarchy would do this country an awful lot of good, but I only say that...
Well, Thomas Jefferson once said that no man's property, life, and security is safe when the legislature is in session.
He must have had prescience about British Columbia. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Do Manitobans, when they go to do their daily occupation and trade, do they not speak in English?
Some do, some don't. There's a significant French minority in Manitoba that go to work and do their trade and do their business.
What's the point of that kind of vacuous question, ma'am?
Well, my husband's a Frenchman, but...
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Penner.
Good morning.
Mr. Penner.
Sir.
What is the percentage of French people in Manitoba?
Now?
Yes.
French speaking about 6%, I would think.
And what about the Russians and the people?
Here comes the John Crosby line. Why don't you make Ukrainian your language? Let's ignore that. I'm not in a very tolerant mood this morning. Go ahead from Victoria.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, speak up from Victoria.
Okay.
In any language.
I have no objection to this man's attitude, I believe. Am I coming through?
Yes, you are.
Okay. He's doing his job, but he just brought up something that annoyed me. We're talking about plebiscites, and we have a minority of French in Manitoba, so they can't decide this on a plebiscite. Well, our whole government is decided on a plebiscite. If it wasn't for the central provinces like Quebec and Ontario having the majority of seats, we wouldn't have had a Liberal government for the last 12 years or half our lifetime practically. We're looking at French ministers.
Well, we are looking at some, but elections are conducted on a multi-issue basis, not on a single-issue basis. And if you're going to have single-issue plebiscites, then a number of very complex problems, as is the case here, are going to be reduced to very simplistic notions, and people will be voting essentially from the gut and not from the head, and I don't know if we want to live in that kind of society.
Hold on a second, please, that one. Here's a call from... Where are you speaking from?
Lynn Lake, Manitoba.
Well, welcome to the program. Go ahead to Roland Penner.
Yes, it may change the subject a little bit, Mr. Penner, on the French language issue, but in northern Manitoba right now, we're faced with a situation where a major employer is going to shut down one mine in 2 years, and he'll be shutting down possibly in March the Leaf Rapids mine, and I was wondering what plans the government has for people up here who have homes, etc.
Well, what we're doing is we're having discussions with Sherritt Gordon. We're trying to persuade them to hold that mine open for a couple of months till we can work out a rescue package. We think we can. We're very conscious of that problem.
Okay, question for me. Are you watching on CanCom satellite?
Yes, we are. We enjoy your program very much. It's about time that Manitoba got a little input into it, Jack.
Well, it's entirely up to you. Tell me, where is Lynn Lake, Manitoba?
We're about 800 kilometers north of Winnipeg.
And these mines, how many people are employed by Sherritt Gordon?
I would imagine that there's about 4,000 altogether with 2 towns.
These are 2 company towns, kind of, are they?
There are 2 company towns, and if the mine shuts down, there's absolutely nothing left up here.
And Roland Penner says they want time to work out a rescue package.
Yep, we think that...
Is that merely a specious offhand remark?
No, it isn't. In fact, we know that part of the problem for both of those towns and for the company isn't closing it down just because it wants to be vengeful or vindictive, is that the present mineral resource is thought to be getting pretty thin below ground, and we think there are more minerals there, and working with our resources, their resources, and some federal resources, we want to do a crash exploration program to find the kind of mineral resources that will warrant the towns staying and the
Well,
mines staying.
let me ask the guy from Lynn Lake, Manitoba. Do you approve of the Poly government's plans to entrench to some extent the French language rights so that Franco-Manitobas can speak to their provincial government in their own language where numbers warrant?
Yes, I certainly do.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for your call.
Thank you, Jack.
Bye. It's good old CanCom.
Yes, yeah, I was surprised. I thought, my God.
No, one of these mornings we're going to get calls from as far away as we can get. Anytime anybody out there watching on any satellite or any rebroad or whatever, anywhere, doesn't matter what the topic is, we'll give away a Webster t-shirt, or maybe 2 Webster t-shirts, or 3 Webster t-shirts, or 10 Webster t-shirts for the calls from furthest away between now and Friday. Now, waking up there in Goose Bay and Gander, Newfoundland, and in Nunavut.
And Churchill, where they've got problems with polar bears. That would make a good one for you.
Churchill, Manitoba?
Sure, we've had a polar bear kill a guy.
I don't know if we go into Churchill or not, but it certainly would be nice to know. Now, go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
I'd like to point out one thing here. I think French are very beautiful people, and as we all be very proud to be a Canadian. But one thing, when it comes to a language, only time we talk about French language, but nothing but else. What about a native language to this country? I've been here in Canada for 15 years, and I got kids that born here. They don't even know what do you say hello in native.
Well, I don't know.
Well, it's a good question, and it really pertains to the preservation of the Aboriginal cultural rights and linguistic rights, and that is one of the things that we're working at painfully slowly with these ministerial and First Ministers' conferences that are being held on the Aboriginal rights issue. We're mindful of it.
You're mindful of it.
Well, and doing something, because we already...
How many years have you been a politician?
I've been a politician, I suppose, from the day I was born. How many years have you been in political office? 2. That's why I'm so naive.
Yeah, I love these phrases. Mindful of it. You're mindful of it.
That's a good,
you will address the question when you remember to
I
be
wouldn't have said
it
it unless, in fact, we were already doing it.
But you've got a whole argot of your own, you know.
I know. I really have to
the one
get a new
hate,
dictionary.
The one I hate most of all is a Bennetization. It's called downsizing. It means cutting.
Did anybody ever remember, and no offense meant, what we used to call R.B. Bennett?
No.
Iron Hill Bennett. He said he would crush the opposition with the Iron Hill of ruthlessness. Did anybody resurrect that term here, Iron Hill Bennett? I wouldn't do it because I'm a visiting politician. That's not my right to do so.
But it's nice of you to throw it in just to remind us. That's good. They're not related, though. R.B. and Bill are not related. See, we had old Second Look Bennett. It was W.H.C. Bennett, a magnificent old creature. Second Look Bennett.
Yeah, well,
now we've got downsizing Bennett.
Well,
I don't know what the next Bennett
W.A.C. Bennett and R.B. Bennett bore quite a physical relationship one to the other.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
Look, I'm going to do another hammer for time. Well, waking up over there. Another segment with Roland Penner after the break. The ironic laugh about the mess you got into over the question of your plebiscites, which just cut the feet from under you, was the fact that you brought in the right of plebiscites to fight nuclear war.
That's right. It turned out to be a two-edged sword.
You NDPers are such woolly-hearted do-gooders, aren't you?
Don't you think there's room for more of us in this cruel world?
I suppose there is. I wouldn't like to admit it in public, though, because our NDP party is in a disastrous state at the moment. In fact, if we still have one, I don't know. Where am I going? Can't see. Roland Penner is the Attorney General of Manitoba. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Penner, I'd like to ask a double-headed question here. If I was a resident of Manitoba and I had won a judgment for, say, $1 million against the Manitoba government, judging on what you have said in this Bilingualism case or whatever, that all the laws would be void, would that judgment be void? And on the other hand, had I been convicted of slitting somebody's throat and sentenced to life imprisonment, would I be able to walk out of prison and then sue you for malicious prosecution because the charge sheet was not written in French?
We've got a legal scholar on our hands. I doubt whether any such judgment would be retrospective, and so whatever was and is will be and will continue to be. It's what would happen
In the
from the date of that judgment
Okay,
on.
from the date of that judgment, if it went totally against you, could I go out and slit somebody's throat without fear of being arrested, or rob a bank for $1 million?
No, what would
I mean, not as a banker, just as an honest, decent robber.
If it went that, have you got those in BC? I thought they were only in the legislature. What happens is, of course, that under the peace, order, and good government section of the Canadian Constitution, the feds, God help us, would come in and do a rescue operation in order to maintain some kind of legal fabric. But who would want it if you could avoid it?
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack. I'm glad to see you being nice to your guests this morning. Mr. Penner, I can see why you're in BC because it's obviously warmer here than it is in Manitoba this time of the year. But
it's wetter.
Tell me, if you're doing your laws, I think on a point of clarification, the Criminal Code of Canada still is the law. And in fact, you would just have a problem enforcing that. If you went out and slit someone's throat, you're still guilty of that offense, but you just couldn't prosecute. Is that not what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
The Mounties would move in and take over for the good order and government of Canada under the Charter, under the Constitution.
Under the BNA Act. Well, we used to call it the BNA
Section
Act.
91 it used to be called. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I'm interested in this 1890 Act. Which he says it was the law of the land, the law of Manitoba.
Was.
Okay. Well, it still is by what he's saying.
No, it's the 1870 Constitution, the Manitoba Act, which is still the law. The 1890 Official Language Act, which tried to scrap 1870, was declared invalid in 1979.
All right. Now, this has happened. I'm very interested in this deal of your where numbers warrant. If this was law to begin with for one man, or 1,000 men, or 10,000 men, or one man, if that law was in force, he was under it. How are you going to fit this where numbers warrant business around? I mean, when you've only got 6% of the population to start out with, anytime anybody is denied anything anywhere under that deal, they'll be able to come right back at you.
Yeah, but you see what happens, and I don't know if the camera can pick this up. The Franco-Manitoban population is concentrated in a few areas, and offices in and serving those areas would be the offices where the services would be made available.
Right, and the other where numbers warrant is in the federal charter, as far as the application of that is concerned. Go ahead from Victoria. Victoria.
This is Penticton?
Penticton. Go ahead from Penticton then.
Sometimes hard to tell the difference.
Senator, if you legislate as you are planning, what will be the provincial policy regarding employment with respect to language for new employees? Must they be bilingual?
No. Are you talking about employment in the civil service?
Yeah.
In your provincial...
No. We've done a survey. We would only require something less than 3% of the civil service to be bilingual, and we already indeed have more than half of that number in place.
Go ahead, please.
Hello. Mr. Penner.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions to ask you. I know the issue is French, the French language, but I heard your remark on the Aboriginal people.
Yes.
And I want to know what you are doing about the unemployment of the Native people within Manitoba, because the unemployment of Native people has always been 80 or 90%, whether you're in the urban area or in the reserves. People are just becoming aware of it now.
Right.
And the other question is, I heard you say that you're mindful of the Aboriginal people's situation, but I want to know whether you would support our using our own languages instead of French in the schools.
Indeed, we have programs in Manitoba and have had since the Schreier government of Native teacher education programs so that Native children in their communities, if they so wish, can begin their school education in Cree or Sota or whatever the language should be, because otherwise they are seriously disadvantaged. And this has helped enormously. With respect to employment, what we're trying to do, and have made some significant steps in doing, is to get away from the old handout type programs and to develop forms of native self-government and community economic development in the hands of the natives.
It's a tough job, though. You say 80 to 90% unemployment among Métis?
Among Métis and particularly status Indians in some communities up north.
Everybody on federal welfare?
Some on provincial welfare if they're outside of the reserves.
That's one of the real problems of the whole country, isn't it?
It's
that we have to be beggars in our own land.
Yes.
Sure as hell is. Go ahead, please, ma'am.
Yes,
Sir.
to Mr. Penner. I'm a native Manitoban. My grandfather worked on the Grand Trunk Railway, and I've been following the politics of Manitoba for a long time. And what I have to say is that I think he's incorrect in stating that Sterling Lyon was refighting the election. But what Sterling Lyon was doing, he was a surrogate for James Richardson in fighting Mr. Trudeau and his policies. I'd like him to comment on that, please.
Well, I don't know if I could make that case. I do know that there were a number of elements who coalesced roughly in opposition to the issue, and certainly I have no hesitation in noting that James Richardson was certainly active in that sense.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Penner.
Yeah.
I'm kind of concerned about common sense and good judgment here, not attacking your administration at all, but talking about all the administrations across this land, about where we can threaten the proposed government and their laws by overruling their said laws and putting them into a state of turmoil or a state of chaos. If I had...
You're talking about the charter?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
And if I attacked that charter and I had won my case and put my case forward and put all the laws invalid, why doesn't the government have some kind of safeguard put, on this charter and say, well, we'll look at the issue after and get ahead with my crime that I was involved with or my...
Yeah, good point.
Well, the charter, of course, has some considerable weaknesses in it. Jack and I were just talking about that before we went on air. One of them is that it probably overdrives its headlights. It reaches too far. It confuses fundamental rights and liberties, or it confuses with fundamental rights and liberties a lot of questions which are really political in nature and should be resolved in the political arena. One of the limitations of the charter is that it has this notwithstanding clause applicable to some sections of the charter, pursuant to which governments, in fact, can pass draconian legislation and opt out.
As a Lougheed has threatened in Alberta, if, for instance, it were found that he does not have the right to restrict the strike weapon, and he's talked about opting out, which he could do.
And Levesque used it in Quebec.
Has already used it in Quebec.
Legislation against the teachers.
When does your House sit? When does the crunch come?
Well, we expect that we'll go back in sometime mid-December after the Tory Leadership Convention, which is this weekend. We will have a new Tory leader, and we were waiting for that person so we could sit down perhaps and talk to that person and hopefully find a consensus or something approaching a consensus. We are determined that one way or another we have to deal with this issue and get it behind us by mid-January, because basically the main problem facing Manitobans, the main problem facing residents of BC, of Canada, is jobs, employment, security, and, Jack, God help us, peace.
And we must be mindful of all these things at all times. my thanks to
I've
Roland,
corrupted you.
My thanks to Roland Penner, Attorney General of Manitoba. Next, different now. I want calls from the Yukon, starting right now. Calls from the Yukon about Bea Firth, the Minister for Education and Tourism, and a couple of other things, who's in the studio next, after the break. I first met the Honourable Bea Firth when we were flying to Ottawa for the convention which finally elected Mulroney as the leader of the Conservative Party. Bea Firth is a cabinet minister from Yukon. She's an MLA there, and you're actually Minister... answer your roll call, please. Are you Minister of Education?
Education, advanced education and manpower.
You
Tourism.
spelled in a line. I was going to ask you one at a time. Education?
Education.
Yes. Recreation?
Recreation.
Manpower and tourism?
Manpower and tourism.
Heritage?
Heritage and cultural resources. We've just changed it, Jack. We just moved the recreation department from education into the tourism So it's now called Tourism, Recreation and Culture.
Before we get down to business, which guy did you back at the Tory convention?
Ah, Jack, I haven't told anyone that. That's my secret. I backed Joe Clark in the beginning. We had a commitment to Joe Clark in Yukon to support him.
And then you switched to Mulroney.
And then we switched.
What do you think of Mulroney?
I think he's fantastic. Brian and Mila were just in the Yukon. We had a tremendously successful dinner. They had probably the largest, I think it was the largest dinner that had ever been held in the Yukon, so it was an event of the century. Almost 500 people turned out.
Now, for people who haven't met you before, you were a nurse to trade, were you not?
That's right.
How long have you lived in the Yukon?
16 years.
What is your abiding interest apart from your husband and your job?
I have animals that I look after, horses, dogs. I spend my holidays in the Yukon with my husband.
And?
I hunt. That's what you want to hear me say.
What I want to hear you
You want to hear me say I hunt.
I want to see you hunt. There's nothing wrong about hunting, is there?
No, there isn't. Jack, a lot of people come to Yukon because of the hunting.
Yeah.
And they find out that we're not such different people in the Yukon. We have interests that are particular to the area we live.
But you're one of the last of the big game areas where big game is available. Do you have good stocks of big game?
We have good stocks. We're a mecca for Dall sheep. Mecca of North America for hunting Dall sheep. We have hunters come from all over the world.
Is that the ones with the big cuddly horns?
That's right, the white, magnificent sheep.
We have a few in British Columbia, don't we?
I don't know if you do. You probably do in the mountains, in the northern mountains.
Okay, caribou?
Yes.
Wolverine? You've shot caribou, have you?
I've shot caribou, bear, moose. I've never shot a wolverine.
What is a wolverine?
It's a predator.
One step short of a wolf, or one step?
Well, no, it's a much smaller animal than a wolf. It's a very vicious animal, and you don't see wolverine very often. They're usually further in the bush, and they'll destroy your camp just as a bear would.
How about black bear?
Black bear and grizzly bear.
How big was the one you shot?
It was an average black bear. I didn't take any measurements. It wasn't anything outstanding. So.
But is this one of the great attractions of the Yukon for tourism?
Yes, it is. The outfitting business is a very profitable business in Yukon. The outfitters, they're not wealthy by any means. Most of them have jobs to support their outfitting business. But we have a lot of European people come to hunt big game in the Yukon. Germans,
Czechoslovakia.
Swiss,
yeah, the
Swiss,
Central
Austrian.
Europe, they're very big
Yes.
in big game hunting.
Yes, and a lot of American hunters.
Do you charge much for tags? I know there was a big fuss in British Columbia a couple of years ago because the tags either weren't dear enough or they were too dear. Have you any idea what the tags are for a big game?
We have a different fee for the visiting hunters, and the tags vary in the hundreds of dollars, and then there's another fee structure for the local hunters.
So local tags are much cheaper than for those who come in.
And the license as
well.
What
would a big game safari cost me in the Yukon? Say there was half a dozen people in it. It might cost you what, $20,000?
Well, they usually don't take people out in large groups. You book on an individual basis, and it can cost you anywhere from $2,000 to $6,000.
Right. Now, what about jobs? What about education in the Yukon these days? Are you having to cut back your teachers and going through the same kind of trauma that we're going through in British Columbia?
Well, we haven't cut back the teachers. We did have some cost-cutting measures in Yukon when we cut the salaries back, the prospective increases that they were going to get. They were to get an 8.5 increase, and we rolled it back to 6 to abide by the 6 and 5. Our enrollments are declining, Jack, so we've had a loss of about 200 pupils in Yukon, so we've lost teachers due to resignations and transfers and so on. Attrition, that's right.
But enrollment is cutting back, of course, because the mining industry, is it still a way off?
It is off. There is some talk now that Cypress Anvil is up for sale officially, and there are some discussions about, some people are feeling very positive that something may happen there. The enrollments have gone down probably most drastically in Faro, which is the Cypress Anvil site.
That's right. I remember it was specially opened last year. Didn't the federal government help to keep you?
Yes, we have a stripping program that's active.
Is that Dome that's in there?
Yes.
It's Dome. Okay, what's the tourist industry worth to, say, worth last year to the Yukon?
1982 was about 51 million, 81, 51 million, 82, 65 million. And we're hoping to boost that up to 100 million if we can.
100 million. Are you still getting the ships from here and up with the tourists? Not many ships from Vancouver.
Well, the ships are coming, but the rail is not operating, so we're busing. A lot of the busing companies, motor coach companies, have been accommodating the visitors to take them to Whitehorse from Skagway.
Is the White Pass in Yukon not running anymore?
No, it's not.
Is that closed down?
Well, there has been no official announcement that it's permanent, but it's not functioning now, and they're still in negotiations.
But you can still go by bus from where? Skagway?
From Skagway to Whitehorse.
Skagway to Whitehorse. How about getting to Dawson?
You go by motor coach. Most of our travelers, Jack, about 77% are independent travelers, we call them. They have their own motor home or their own vehicle.
I was up there once at 33 below in Whitehorse days. What month?
In February. That would be at Rendezvous. You were there, I believe.
That's right. I did not carry the 600-pound sack of flour on my back either.
I carried 400 pounds one year when I was much younger and active in Rendezvous.
Mind you, you're standing up when you get it on your back off the truck, aren't you?
No, we didn't have trucks in those days when I did it. It was free flour packing.
And you had to lift
truck,
it?
That's right.
You'd have to roll under it, stand up.
No, the weight of the flour just pulls you over backwards, and it's a very dangerous thing, flour packing.
I know, it cripple you for life.
It can, yes.
But somebody always does it, don't they? Okay, Bea Firth. Let's have some calls from Yukon and anywhere else this morning about the Yukon. You've only been a cabinet minister for how long now?
1.5 years.
And you've only been in the government for how long now?
1.5 years.
That matches. Be mindful of these things when you're questioning Bea Firth, Minister of Education and Tourism, from Whitehorse.
Whitehorse?
Yeah, take it away. Bea Firth. I suppose there are a number of people out there who still think of Yukon in the way that W.C. Fields used to portray it. He'd stand at the door of an old shack and he would open the door, you know, in the Yukon. Somebody would throw in a handful of corn flakes and he'd say, "'Tain't a fit night out for man nor beast." It's not that bad, the weather in the Yukon, is it?
No, it isn't, Jack. We are having beautiful weather right now. We have a skiff of snow and beautiful sunny skies and 0-degree temperatures, but we adjust to that. It's quite comfortable.
Yeah, mind you, it's pretty expensive to heat your house in the Yukon.
It can be expensive. It's expensive to live in the Yukon, but that's...
Go ahead from Cassiar, way up there somewhere, but in British Columbia.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
My question for Mrs. Firth. A couple of years ago in Whitehorse, they had a public plebiscite on whether to retain drinking in public or not. And even though the majority of voters decided that they would like to have public drinking, City Council decided it wasn't good. In a democratic society, how does that happen?
Well, perhaps you'll have to call City Council and ask them. I really can't respond for City Council's decision.
But you can answer the question, what do you think about drinking in public?
I think it's great.
Oh, no, I was asking. I know you think it's great because you're up in Cassiar where there's not that many of the public to watch you drinking in public. But you don't recommend, do you, drinking in public in the streets of Vancouver, do you now?
I don't go to Vancouver all that often.
Now, obviously, B, you don't recommend boozing in the streets of Whitehorse or anywhere else, do you?
No, I don't recommend boozing on the streets of Whitehorse.
What else do you do up in Cassiar, this particular gentleman, apart from drink in the streets?
Oh, I work up here. I just got off of graveyards. Tuned you in to give you a call.
Ah, it's nice of you. How's your job? Quite secure?
It stinks, but it's money.
What kind of job is it?
Oh, I work up in the mine garage fixing trucks.
Oh, well, what, 15 bucks an hour?
A little more.
A little more, 18 bucks an hour.
16 and change.
16 and change. Teamsters?
Pardon me?
Are you Teamsters?
No, steelworker.
Steelworkers. Okay, much obliged.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to learn a little bit about callers from faraway places. Go ahead, please, to Bea Firth.
Morning, Bea Firth. I was talking to a Yukon gold miner over the weekend, and he claims that big city disease called bureaucracy has infected the Yukon. The environmentalists, he says, are forcing legislation that will end surface gold mining. Would you comment on that, please?
Well, we have been presenting briefs at hearings regarding the new federal guidelines that are going to be imposed on the placer mining industry. And Yukon has been standing up and saying, look, placer mining is alive and well in Yukon, and we wish to keep it that way. And who are these people that want to impose these guidelines and shut all the placer mining down? And we find out that it is, in fact, the environmentalists, and there are some controversies over the fishing limits, too.
Placer mining has been a traditional way of mining for gold in the Yukon and northern BC and the interior for years.
Placer mining is part of the heritage of Yukon.
You don't see anything wrong with it done
No,
properly.
That's right.
Okay, there's your answer from Bea Firth. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Morning to the lady. I just wanted, I drove a tractor trailer into Yukon and right up to Alaska. There's one thing I found when I was sitting in a pub one night. The tourists coming up to hunt in the Yukon. There was 3 American gentlemen sitting at the next table, and I overheard the conversation.
Go on.
And they were talking about they had their game already waiting for them up there.
What do you mean, had the game already tied up, waiting to be shot in the moose
They were already shot. They had the antlers and everything.
Had they been there?
They haven't got to where they were going, but it's already waiting for them. They're going to pay for everything.
No, I've never heard of any allegations.
That sounds like a real Yankee big game hunting expedition.
I think you're right.
Sounds like a fish story to me, Jack.
Yeah, a little bit fishy. Even Americans wouldn't do that, you know. Go ahead from Whitehorse.
Yes, hi, is that me?
That's you.
Yeah, Jack, I just want to say to Bea that she's looking darn good coming over the air here, and tell them about the way we want to keep going here in the Yukon and the way we want to be part of Canada. This is Lance.
Hello, Lance. I'll tell Jack that.
Okay, you're coming over beautiful.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you, Lance. Here's another call from Whitehorse. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah.
And Bea, I just want to remind Bea to invite you up for the rendezvous.
Can't come in February. I'm working. Unless it's on a weekend.
Every time we ask you, you say that you weren't invited. I caught you over in Salt Spring Island one Saturday afternoon, and you told me you weren't invited. Nobody asked you.
Were the tears running down my face?
Tears were running right down your cheeks.
I'll invite Jack to the Yukon again. I think he needs a refresher course anyways on the Yukon.
Be sure to invite him up, Bea.
I will.
I'm not carrying 400 pounds of flour on my back.
No, you won't have to do that, Jack. We'll take care of you.
Thanks very much. Well, who knows? Might be a good ANG for the weekend. Eh? Is it on a weekend?
Rendezvous is, the celebrations go on all week, but the major ones are on the weekend.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good morning, ma'am. Can you please tell me where I might get a list of mining operations in the Yukon to include location, number of employees, and even key local personnel of the mining operation?
You want to sell something?
Precisely.
You could contact the Chamber of Mines in Whitehorse.
Okay.
Don't you have a guy in Vancouver? You used to have a Yukon house here, didn't you?
Yes, we don't have that anymore, Jack.
Yeah, Chamber of Mines, Whitehorse, and tell them Bea Firth sent you.
Thank you very much.
You'll get it, no problem at all. Go ahead, please.
Hello, is that Minister? Can I speak to Minister B?
Yeah.
Hello, Minister B.
I'm here. Hello.
Hello, it's Tony Sinclair speaking, and you've done me a great disservice this morning. Every time I hear about the blooming Yukon, I get a great big lump in my throat. I was very privileged to have played Diamond Tooth Gertie up there for 2 years running, and also did Rendezvous. And I'd just like to take this opportunity of saying to all my friends and buddies up there, hello in Dawson City in Yukon and Whitehorse, and also just to let them know I'd love to come up again, so please invite me.
What about saying hello to me, Tony?
Hello, me old darling. Listen, I can talk to you anytime. But, Jack, there is one thing. You really should go up there, again, just to clear out the cobwebs.
Their
cobwebs? These days.
Their cobwebs? What did you say about me?
Clear out your cobwebs, Jack.
Clear out the cobwebs, me old darling.
She said I was looking old.
Well, older. I think the
Cobwebs.
makeup, something's happened to your makeup this morning.
Yeah, I'm looking pasty-faced.
Anyway, welcome to British Columbia, and hello, everybody up there.
Okay, Tony.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, what are you paying for gas up there?
Gas is $2.60 a gallon, gallon-wise, 54 point something a liter, or 44 point something a liter.
It's not that much more than us. What do we pay here? We pay 50 cents a litre, don't we? Roughly speaking.
54.4
Yeah.
liter, yeah.
Anything else?
That's in Whitehorse, though.
Yes, that is. It costs more the more further north you go.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack. Good morning, Bea. This is Sourdough Sue Ward over here in Richmond, where I'm putting in a little winter before returning to my little home on Princess Street in Dawson City, just around the corner from your family home. And last time I met you was the opening of the new tourist visitors recreation building in Dawson this last summer. And I would just like to ask you if you would just clue some of the people in on the tremendous program that Parks Canada has underway in Dawson City. I spent last summer as a bus tour guide taking hundreds and hundreds of people around Dawson and up the Gold Creeks and panning for gold. And it really was the highlight of their trip, and many of them had come from even the eastern seaboard or from Australia and England.
Did you ever stop talking when you were on the bus tours?
This is on the tour buses that Bea was telling you, pick up the people from down in...
Great stuff, great stuff, great stuff. Bea, thanks very much for coming in this morning.
You're very welcome, Jack.
Bea Firth, Minister of Education and Tourism for the Government of Yukon. Challenging, tough country, but a great place for tourists.
Yes, it is.
See you again. Thanks
Thank you,
very
Jack.
much, Bea. Next, the Reverend Bill Russell, after the break. Unusual kind of guest this morning. It's the Reverend Bill Russell, the General Secretary of the Canadian Bible Society, just back from some curtains behind the Iron, some countries behind the Iron Curtain. Willie, if I may call you that.
You may.
What does the Canadian Bible Society do? Print Bibles?
We print Bibles, we translate Bibles, we distribute scriptures in many different languages in Canada
When
and
I
all
was
over
a
the
small
world.
boy in Sunday school, I used to take my threepenny bits and my pennies and my halfpennies to translate the Bible into all kinds of languages, mostly in Africa.
All over the world, 1,760 some languages to date, Jack.
And I can remember Stobel Glen, my old minister, saying that you had to give some money to help convert the heathen.
Well, we're doing some of that, I hope, with our Bible translation.
We don't call them heathen anymore.
No, we're a little
do
more
we?
discreet today, aren't we?
They were pagans and they were heathen in those unrecalcitrant Scotch Presbyterian days.
Now they're non-believers.
Is that what we call them?
Well,
what you call them,
well,
non-believers?
that's one term.
All right, now, how many Bibles would you print in any given year, if that's not a silly question?
We distributed this past year almost 11 million scriptures in Canada.
In the English language?
No, in 100 different languages in Canada. Around the world, as I said, 1,700 and some. 486 million scriptures last year around the world.
Yeah, and you're the fourth biggest Bible society in the world? Who is the biggest?
The British and Foreign Bible Society. No, I'm sorry, the American Bible Society is the biggest. The British and Foreign is the oldest.
It's the oldest?
Yes.
Now,
that's the one you were giving to as a boy in Scotland.
That's one. Missions. No, it was something about missions. Well, the missions was...
Oh, probably.
That was a separate wee cloth bag for the missions, wasn't it?
More than one wee cloth bag.
Oh, lots of wee cloth bags. All right, now, what have you been doing? Where have you been and what have you been doing behind the Iron Curtain?
We were to Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Czechoslovakia to see actual Bible production and distribution projects funded by the United Bible Societies. People in Canada aren't sure they can believe that their contributions actually go to Bibles being printed and distributed in those countries.
Yeah, there's a commonly held, somewhat ignorant belief that religion has been totally stamped out behind the Iron Curtain.
Not true.
Is there any country in the Iron Curtain areas where religion has been stamped out? No.
I don't know, Jack. I only visited 4, and I found each of them so different from all the others that I would hesitate to generalize.
Well, Poland obviously is a very strongly Roman Catholic country where, if one can take the Pope's visit, and where obviously there must be a fair amount of religious freedom.
One can take our visit. We were in Poland 4 days. We went to 4 church services in 4 different churches of 4 different denominations. Every service packed.
And that would be Catholic, Lutheran?
Lutheran, Old Catholic, and Reformed.
And Reformed Catholic.
It was a thrilling experience.
Yeah, it would be.
And the same thing happened in Romania, in Hungary, and in Czechoslovakia. The churches are flourishing in a way that puts to shame some of what's going on in our churches in Canada.
Well, now in Czechoslovakia and Prague, for instance, they haven't had any trouble since about 1950 real trouble since about 1956.
Things seem very calm on the surface in Prague. It's a beautiful city. And
it's a beautiful city because it escaped all the bombing that the other European
Yes.
capitals got. As I recall,
Yes.
only 2 small bombs were dropped by accident.
Yes, it has a sense of age about it that's very impressive.
How about Romania?
Romania is an Eastern city, mysterious, exciting. Eastern Orthodoxy flourishes, of course, in Romania, but there are many, many people of the Reformed faith and of other churches too.
Now, what about the individuals you met, living standards and individuals you met in these places?
We were, I think, surprised that life was as ordinary as it was. People go about their ordinary tasks. They go to work, they come home, they eat their meals, they go to restaurants. But underneath it all, there is a sense of uncertainty. When people feel free to talk, there's anxiety. They wonder about the future. They wonder how long things will be the way they are now.
Did you have any discussions with anyone about unilateral nuclear disarmament or any of these kind of sensitive topics these days?
Yes, and of course, people in Eastern Europe are very anxious about disarmament. They're very suspicious of unilateral disarmament. I think they feel that there's no possibility of that on either side.
No, and I don't suppose there's fact. I just shudder when I see these American jets attacking Syrian targets over the weekend. You wonder how long things are going to carry on like
But
this.
you know, the military presence in Eastern Europe is constant. In one of the airports, a tank ran up and down the tarmac between the planes and the terminal with its swivel gun fanning the whole while we were there.
Which airport would that be?
That was in Bucharest.
Bucharest in
Romania.
Romania.
Yes. But Jack, one of the most exciting things I saw was the production of scriptures. To actually be in a state-owned printing press and see 40,000 Bibles in process of production was for me mind-boggling. I couldn't believe it.
Where would that be?
That was in Hungary, in Budapest.
So the state's making money by selling Bibles. I presume the state is officially non-clerical.
The state isn't selling the Bibles, but we have a very good business relationship with the state whereby we are allowed to produce Bibles for distribution quite freely across the country.
In a state plant?
In a state
In
plant.
other words, your
Yes,
people
sir.
in Hungary will go in, supply the material for the Bible, whichever version it happens to be.
Yes.
They will, and you will buy the Bibles from them on a contract basis.
We contract them to print the Bibles on paper we provide from the West, binding materials we send in from the West, and then we have the scriptures to distribute to the people.
Same applies in Romania?
The same applies in Romania.
Czechoslovakia?
Not so in Czechoslovakia.
How do you do it in Czechoslovakia?
In Czechoslovakia, there hasn't been Bible production for a number of years, but we're currently working very hard to arrange a significant import of scriptures in 1984. I mean, like 120,000.
Which you can freely sell, you trust?
Yes, we trust. Well, the last experience a few years ago found all of those scriptures distributed. I visited a pastor in a local church who has 2 Bibles left for his congregation.
That's quite incredible. Prayer books, Bibles, hymn
books.
Hymn books as well.
All of these things are being made available in these 4 countries.
So you're a non-profit society,
We're
obviously.
non-profit, obviously.
You
yes,
make enough.
we subsidize our work through the contributions of people in countries like Canada.
Yeah, from all sections of the church world?
Yes, we're supported by the ecumenical spectrum, Roman Catholics, Protestants,
And you're in town
Orthodox.
specifically. Where is your base?
I'm from Toronto. I'm
Toronto.
here for the opening of the new Bible house of the British Columbia district of the Bible Society.
At 700 Kingsway at Fraser in
That's right.
Vancouver.
Thanks for the
on
plug.
Sunday.
Yesterday.
Oh, it's over.
It's over. Yes, it was a
Big
great
success.
success. It was indeed. Was indeed.
Okay, sit there, Bill. I'm going to do a free-for-all between now and the end, but if anybody wants to talk to Bill Russell, the Bible man,
we'd be glad to hear it.
General Sec of the Canadian Bible Society will handle the calls. So free-for-all between now and 10:30. Go ahead from Armstrong, BC.
Hello, Mr. Webster.
Morning, sir.
Here we are.
Go on.
Okay. Now, he was talking about printing Bibles.
Right.
Now, what language or what...
Any language where there's a demand, is that not correct?
Any language. We're constantly working on new translations.
what I mean is, do you print Catholic or St. James?
We print many different versions and translations. Here in Canada, we print a Good News Bible, which is both for Roman Catholics and for Protestants. The same is true in many countries abroad. The scriptures are basically ecumenical for use and acceptance by Christians of all faith traditions.
This is an acceptable ecumenical
Absolutely,
version.
yes.
I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yes, the Good News Bible in English, La Bible en français courant in French, are best sellers in Canada, and they're both Bible Society products.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Webster. I watch your program regularly, and not anything to do with the gentleman you just had on.
Right.
But on your program with the solidarity and everything, I got an awful funny feeling that there was an awful pile of beards on the protest lines of BC. If they don't seem to have a beard, they seem to have an accent of some description. Now, I noticed that even the government, with their negotiator, got in on the beard bit.
Mark.
I wondered if you ever would do a program of this nature. I'll hang up now and listen to you on the TV.
I've got a beard, and I'm not in solidarity.
He's not in solidarity. Norman Spector has a beard. Larry Keane has a beard. Jim Hewitt, Education Minister, has a beard. Oh, don't know, Claude. Oh, you mean no, in solidarity. I can't think of anybody else in solidarity. Who? Ann Steen has a beard. Monroe doesn't have a beard. Cuby doesn't have a beard. Kramer hasn't got a beard.
Some of us have beards, not because of our political affiliations, but because our wives like them.
I suppose so. I used to have a beard.
Yes.
I looked very good with a beard. I hid my double chin. Go ahead, please.
Hello, I'd just like to ask your guest how he feels about smuggling Bibles and why Bibles are smuggled into these countries if they are printed in Iron Curtain countries.
Jack, that's a very sensitive question. In the 4 countries in which I was visiting, Bibles are available through the work of the Bible Society entirely legally and openly. We believe that that's the way to go, to find opportunities to work with the state authorities so that the scriptures can be available to people without secrecy or contraband. In some countries, I understand that the shortages are even more severe than the ones I saw in these 4 countries. And there are some well-meaning people who believe that Bible smuggling is the way to meet that need. I can tell you that in the 4 countries I visited, the people who are engaged in open Bible work feel that the Bible smuggling is the greatest possible threat to the success of their work. In one country, I was told by one man that not only his work, but his very life is put in danger every time a contraband shipment of Bibles is confiscated by the government.
So therefore, the Canadian Bible Society does not endorse, encourage, nor take part in the smuggling of Bibles?
Absolutely not.
That's a fair enough answer. Go ahead, please.
Hello, nothing to do with your guest, but I'd just like to say that there still is a BC Chamber of Mines in the Yukon, and for the Yukon on Hastings Street, that someone can get a list of all the operational...
Oh, you're talking about the Chamber of Mines for BC and the Yukon.
That's right, it's still on Hastings.
It's always been there.
Yes.
It's just across from the Terminal City Club.
That's right, and it still is there and is still open.
I can't remember the name of the guy who runs it, but it's still there and it's still open.
It was last week.
Jolly good show.
Also, I would like to say, the unemployment figures in BC, we've just been told that they've been dropped, they're down. Do these figures include people that have run out of UIC?
No, ma'am.
So my husband, who's unemployed and doesn't qualify for welfare, he's not even a statistic now?
I don't think so, unless he's included by accident in the seasonally adjusted garbage.
So these figures mean absolutely nothing?
I think they're a kind of Gallup poll sampling, and they're extrapolated to cover industry. You can get a separate count of claimants for unemployment insurance, but it's also inaccurate because that includes claims that have already been met or are being processed in a different way. You've got to go just on the general figure. I think it's 13.5% for BC as of this moment.
I see. So as more people run out of UIC, the better the figures look for the government.
That is my belief, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. From Prince George, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to quote a little bit of scripture here for your solidarity members, if I could.
Please.
Okay, it's from Romans 13. It says, "Obey the government, for God is the one who has put it there. There's no government anywhere that God has not placed in power. So those who refuse to obey the laws of the land are refusing to obey God, and punishment will follow." That's all I got to say.
Good. I don't have to accept that particular set of scripture. Render unto Caesar, I think is... Can you complete the render unto Caesar quote?
The things that are Caesar, and unto God the things that are God's.
That, for me, my interpretation, not Bill Russell's, is a more apt quotation when you're dealing with the government. Now that's... I could give you another one, but I won't. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Reverend Russell, interesting that you should be on this morning. My husband just is ordering Good News translated in Hungarian, large or small print, and
go on.
Abbotsford area, he's ordering it, and they can't find a Good News. They're ordering a Corelli Bible from the States, and I've never heard about it. Could you answer that, please?
Well, various countries have different contemporary translations of the scriptures. The Good News Bible is a particular style of translation intended for very contemporary, easy-to-read language.
This is what I wanted.
Yes. Who have you been in contact with to try to order this Bible?
Well, I don't know. My husband works around Abbotsford area, and it was...
Hold on, we'll get your number and perhaps deal with that off the air. 3. From Whitehorse, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to put a little correction towards the lady that called in on your BC Chamber of Mines.
Yeah, go on, correct it now.
BC Yukon Chamber of Mines was formed to represent the Yukon maybe 30 or 35 years ago, and there's no affiliation now with the...
In other words, you're better to deal directly with the Mines Department in Whitehorse, is that correct?
Yeah, it's Yukon Chamber of Mines in Whitehorse. They're two different outfits.
Okie dokie. I think I've got the Bible Society telephone number here. No, I don't have. Yes, I do. That woman should phone 872-6691.
I guarantee they'll take care of her.
872-6691, and my thanks to Bill Russell of the Canadian Bible Society. Thanks, Willie.
Thank you.
After the break. I'm going to have the ebullient Campagnola on tomorrow, and we might have a bash at Harcourt about these co-op housing for the upper class at 2% mortgage money. God bless Moira Faro. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. precisely.